Okay, we are live.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Welcome to the September 5th Personnel and Policy Committee meeting. We have our agenda up on the screen in front of us. And the first three things we're going to talk about after public comment, if there is any, are policies. Is there any people wishing to speak right now?
Not at this time, Mr. Klein.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer, you want to take us through the three policies, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hello, everyone, again. First policy is policy 218, student discipline. Let me open it up for everyone. Make it a little bit larger. This policy, I mean, there's very little changes to this policy beyond some, language changes. You can see that they're in bold. A lot of the things are the annotations as they relate to school code to make them consistent with what the policy is advertising. But at the end of the policy, I did put terminology with what the revisions are updated with. I mean, it, it's very simple with this one. I mean, the language on incident reporting to law enforcement and PD is updated just to reflect the current school code terminology. And then some of the legal citations to the new sections of school code, they were just added to this. And PSBA, it's obviously a mandated policy, but this was one of the ones that they felt that we should update all three of these together, much like we did with Title IX. I don't know if anyone has any questions about any sections of the policy. It's fairly the same policy as before, except some words were added specifically with PDE and law enforcement.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Does anybody on the committee have any questions? Any board members not on the committee have any questions?
I have a question.
Oh, I didn't see, I saw you were there, Mrs. Spence, but I don't see your hand. Go ahead.
Um, my question, I sent an email about the demographics.
Yes.
What is your question?
So is there an answer to that, or
I didn't hear what you said, Miss Spence. You broke up a little bit.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with trying to figure out my trying to find the volume. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
I'll be right back for me.
Okay. I didn't know, Mr. Klein, if anyone had any other questions in the meantime at all. I can try to answer them for them.
I don't believe so. I asked and I didn't see any hands, so I don't think we do.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, super. So my question is between the last time we had the comprehensive plan and most recently last school year, has the demographics for the students that are being disciplined and suspended and expelled, is it the same as what was that 4 years ago, where they were being suspended, and it's debatable about the rate. I understood it to be 3 times the enrollment of the school. But I think Mr. Rodriguez disagreed with that number. Did it change, in other words?
I couldn't answer that accurately. I did reply to your email. We are preparing that information for you. I know you had asked for a couple different things in an email. One was the demographics, also the discipline numbers and as they relate to police intervention. But we are preparing that for you. We don't have that to give you to you this evening.
Okay. Is it possible we have that as a committee before we continue with this policy change?
I mean, that would definitely have to be up to the committee. But I don't. That's up to the committee if we, whether we would move this policy forward or not.
Is there an estimate time, a ETA, on when you will have that information?
I think we're hoping to have that to be shared and then be presented during our next committee meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Armato.
Yeah, I think Ms. Spence makes a fair request of the committee that we be able to take a look at those numbers and review them before we move on. It may or may not change anything about our approach to the policy, but I think that's a fair request.
Mr. Klein, if you or the committee, we could move these policies to next month and review them with what we put together with what we can present with the discipline data. If you would like to do that.
I was not privy to the email, so I'm not totally sure what Mrs. Spence was asking about or information. I don't really see how that impacts changing a couple words in here that had nothing to do with demographics or recidivity or anything similar to that. I think we should definitely look at that. I don't see why it would hold up this policy. Anyone else? Okay, so do we want to move this forward or do we want to wait? Mr. Armada?
Well, as I said, I doubt seriously, because the email that Ms. Spence refers to was, I believe, sent to administration, and as per our practice, each of the board members should have also received that email. If I believe that we all did, and as I said, I don't think that the review of those statistics are going to change in any way what we are looking at in policy. But as a matter of courtesy and as a matter of due diligence, I believe that it's worthy of us to look at all those numbers so we know what we're actually talking about.
Okay, Mrs. Lawrence?
I'm fine with that, with what Mr. Amata said. I agree with you guys. I don't think that it will change anything here, but I don't think it would hurt to wait another month and have that info.
Okay, so we'll table this one until our next policy and personnel meeting. Do you want to move on to weapons, or is this going to be the same thing for all three?
Weapons and terroristic threats. I mean, both of them are the same as discipline. There's very little changes in any of the policies at all. But if the committee wants to utilize that with all three, or if we want to look at the weapons one in isolation.
Mr. Armato?
Again, unless I'm misunderstanding something, the discipline policy and the questions that Ms. Spence brought rise to, that is a different issue than what is our policy on weapons and what is our policy about terroristic threats. I'm just speaking to me. I'm very comfortable with tonight reviewing weapons and terroristic threats and saying, okay, let's make a decision about a recommendation that we would pass on to the entire board.
Thank you. Mrs. Lawrence?
Yeah, sorry, I'm looking for my hand. Yeah, I agree with that completely. I can see how student discipline is encompassing a lot of different things, and it might be useful to look at some of those numbers, but in terms of weapons and threats, I think that's more cut and dry. I mean, I don't know why the rates of anything would matter. Either something is a weapon or it isn't, and we either say it's okay or it isn't. I'm not sure. So I'm okay with looking at those two tonight.
Mrs. Spence?
Yes, I don't have a problem with reviewing weapons and terroristic threats as long as it's not tied, which it looks like it is. The policy numbers look very similar to student discipline, but it doesn't have, it shouldn't have anything to do with student discipline. It should be its own separate policy. It should have its own separate number, actually, and not like a asterisk next to it or a one and a two.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Boyer, why don't we look at the weapons policy?
Sure. Let's make it a little larger for everyone. So, obviously, like we had spoke to, like this policy addresses weapons, the possession of weapons in a school setting, and also as far as the threat to safety, and then it's prohibited by law. This one, there is also very little changes related to the policy itself at all beyond words and also the citations related to school code. There is another clause that I put in here at the bottom to explain the terminology as to what we were actually looking at to adapt, and it's relatively the same language that is in the other policies. It addresses the reporting to law enforcement and the PD, and then the updates are just reflective of what the current school code provisions are. It doesn't define anything basically different in the policy. It just clarifies anything that is consistent with school code in accordance to the law.
Thank you. Any questions from committee members?
A stupid question. So what exactly does that mean in terms of a student having something like a scissors? Because obviously in certain classes, art classes, they might be using a scissors. So theoretically, that is having a scissors on school property. So how exactly, what does that mean? They can't carry it around?
Mr.
Well,
Rodriguez?
Yeah, I can answer that because it's a very valid question. And both Mr. Boyer and I have had experiences with this. We have even more than that. If you go to culinary arts, we have very long and extremely sharp knives. The only time those become what I believe is called an instrument of crime is when you use that in a nefarious or inappropriate way. But otherwise, the primary purpose is the primary purpose. So if you use a pencil and stab someone, that essentially is going to be something that we would discipline. That's probably an outlandish example, but you get the point. So in order for scissors, scissors being found or any other such article that has a normal regular purpose is not what this refers to. It would be
But then is this clear? Because at the top in this definition, it says that a weapon is a cutting instrument. And then right below it, if a student is in possession of it or it's found on them.
Yeah. That's directly out of the law. So I would not suggest that we change that. But as you know, the how it's worded within the law, which is pretty much a cut and paste. The wording of it has to be backed up with regard to practice and interpretation. So, and I understand that that's a little bit weird, but we would probably get pretty intricate and trip ourselves up if we try to veer away from the law.
No, I don't.
Mr.
No, I agree. I'm just not sure that's clear. I don't, to me, I would, if, I don't know. I'm just worried that there's a sort of a, like someone could argue and say that it, I don't know, I just don't think that's clear. Maybe I'm just not seeing it.
For me, Mrs. Lawrence, the last sentence under the weapon definition, where it says, or any other tool, instrument, or implement capable of inflicting serious bodily injury. So a pencil could be a weapon.
Right.
Same with the scissors, it could be, but that doesn't mean it falls into the knife, cutting instrument, cutting tool, that they're different.
But then when you say if they're in possession of it, what? So they can't, but it makes it sound like if they're in possession of any of those things, that's a problem. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I get the difference. I'm just trying to see if someone could read that in a vague way. Like, oh, well, that means somebody shouldn't be carrying around a sharp pencil. I don't know. I mean, I know that sounds stupid, but we're talking about policy. We want to make sure that anyone reading this is clear.
Mr. Amato.
Yes, first, on a lighter note, I'm sure that Mr. Rodriguez was looking for a pun when he said, get to the point when we were talking about scissors. Nice work. I appreciate it. Gave me a
Pencil,
smile.
not scissors.
Understanding the point that Mrs. Lawrence is trying to make about how that might be interpreted, and Mr. Rodriguez brought up a good example, and we'll only amplify it more since we are a comprehensive high school and have a very complete CTE program. I can walk into auto shop and that lug wrench becomes a weapon if it's used inappropriately. Okay? I can walk into construction technology and that hammer becomes a weapon if it's used inappropriately. And I would probably suggest that a student walking down the hall with a hammer would be inappropriate, or a lug wrench would be inappropriate. So there may be some value to looking at that wording again and delineating perhaps, as Mr. Rodriguez pointed out, how they are used, because virtually anything can be a weapon. It's a matter of its use.
Thank you. I think we're straying into some dangerous territory here, trying to revise the law, however. I'm not very comfortable with that. Mrs. Spence?
Thank you. So again, this leads back to my question from the beginning, initially, understanding the demographics, because students of color are oftentimes accused of these sort of crimes, possession of a weapon, which could be anything, a pencil, a scissors, or anything for school related, only because they're in possession of it when they're searched because of a supposedly, and that's a quote, air quotes, of a violation of the rules. And policy always goes back to people of color. Always reminded, and I've been reminded of this my whole life, that's the policy, that's the policy, that's the policy. This policy is not clear. And if you or the board doesn't feel comfortable changing the policy or changing the wording because it's school code, then why are we making a policy for this? Why is this in front of us if we can't make this clear so that if there is a violation by any student, there is no doubt in anyone's mind whether or not they violated the policy? But then in this situation could be subjective. It could be oh, we feel as if you had a sharp pencil in your pocket, so you were using that as a weapon and you were in possession of it. So the definition, according to our policy or school code, is that possession of the pencil is a weapon. And, I'm just being whatever for dramatic for a purpose, because it comes down to what our policy says and not what we think it should say. It should be written, it should be clear about what is a violation of the rule weapon.
Again, I think it's intent. To me, almost anything a student has in school could be brandished as a weapon. Could be a water bottle, could be a backpack with books in it. The determining factor to me is how is it there for a reason? Knives, cutting instruments, nunchucks, firearms aren't there for a reason. Pencils, water bottles, lug wrenches, culinary knives are there for a reason. Our administration has plenty to do. Dr. DeAnimal's online. I don't think they're going to be going around looking for sharp pencils. And that's your example. I understand. Mr. Rodriguez.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know. I must need to update. I'm desperately looking for the hand function so I can fit in with everyone else.
I can't find mine either. That's why.
Okay.
So it's not just.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you, Mrs. Lawrence, for saying that, because I'm looking under every option. I can't.
Yeah, I've tried everything too, and I'm not finding it either. So
It's under reactions.
mine doesn't have it. It just has strength of reaction. Oh, wait. If I hover a different way.
You gotta hover the mouse all the way down.
Mine
Right.
says play chime for raised hand, full, medium, and hidden.
Yeah, that's what mine had too. But now move your cursor over just a little, and then it does all of a sudden pop up.
Yeah.
It's like above the heart, the little heart, not the not arrow.
Found it. Thank you, Mrs. Spence and Mr.
You're welcome.
All right. So I guess what I would say is, number one, as we have always said to the committee, you bring up wonderful points. These are important things to talk about and debate. We're fine with going slow. That's why we try to bring this stuff to you. We can look into how other school districts are doing this. We can talk to our solicitors. The one thing that I would say that we can kind of keep in mind and is perhaps helpful here is, if let's say that an administrator went rogue, which, by the way, they all study school law, they all understand these concepts and understand how to take policy and law like this and appropriately implement it. But Mrs. Spence is correct that someone could be overzealous and say, hey, your sharpened pencils, they're stabbing instruments. You've got a suspendable piece of or a suspendable weapon here, so we're going to suspend you. That is true. However, there is due process of law, and that would be quickly overturned by any court of law. So we have to we do go by that standard. If a police department is not going to be pressing charges, or it is not recognized as a, such as scissors is a great example. Let's stick with scissors. So if scissors are in someone's possession and it's a cutting tool, I mean, we give kids scissors all the time. And it's in pretty much every single classroom. The only way that would be deemed a weapon is if someone tried to inflict bodily injury on someone else. So we're happy to, and it sounds like maybe we want to do this. That's fine by me. I try to listen wherever possible. We can take this back. It's a month isn't going to hurt anything. We'll take it back. We'll take a strong look, see if there's anything we can do to improve the policy. And worst comes to worst, you'll have the exact same language with our recommendation in front of you, and then you'll have to decide whether you veer further, or maybe we can improve the language. So I hope that's helpful. And I think.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Heidel.
Yeah, just listening to the discussion, I think a lot of it is not the instrument as much as it is the intent. And just to, in the business I work in, we would describe something as contraband. Okay, separating the idea that a knife in culinary or a wrench in an auto shop would be tools or stuff for work, things that would not belong in that would be considered contraband. So I think that's when you're trying to put down weapons. As a district, we would not be liable for something happening with something that belongs to us in the use of something. Whereas something brought in from the outside would be considered contraband and would be something that would be considered punishable. Make kind of some sense? Just, because like you said, auto shops, well, yeah, that is a tool that belongs to the district. You brought something in that is not permitted, that's contraband. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Heidel. So, Mr. Rodriguez, I think it's fairly clear we need to table this for the night evening. And maybe we can look and see what some other districts have for this, how much leeway we would have legally to make any changes. And then with your recommendations for next month, we can go into a little deeper dive.
Absolutely. We'll take an honest look at it and try to bring some clarity, because we do not want anyone to misread this and suspend kids when they shouldn't be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer, want to move to the third one?
Sure. So the third one, policy 218.2, is terroristic threats. You're going to see the same concept with this policy as you did with the previous two. There's very little changes in this policy. I'll make it a little bit larger first. Like, so it does define the definition of a terroristic threat, but that definition has not changed. What has changed in here really are a couple little things here. You can see in bold here, in the case of a student with a disability, including a student of whom an evaluation is pending, the district is required to comply with state and federal regulations and procedures related to that with, law enforcement and board policy. So that a terroristic threat or something labeled as that with someone that would say that could be taken a little bit differently than someone with not out a disability. The other changes are simply the same thing with the school codes and the words and the annotations. And I did put that same language at the bottom, which is somewhat different, but the language that addresses disabilities was moved into the authority section of the policy to align with other policies with the same provisions. And then the languages are also updated with the legal citations. But I can go back to what was bolded if you would like to see it again. And if anyone has any questions as to exactly what that means, I can also attempt to answer those too.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Boyer? Seeing none, is it okay if we move this forward to the committee of the whole this month? I see Mr. Armato saying, give me a thumbs up. Mrs. Lawrence is shaking her head yes. Mrs. Spence?
Yes, that's fine.
We can move this one forward then, Mr. Boyer.
Okay, thank you. So 218 and 218.1 we would be bringing back, and then 218.2. Okay, I got it.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, if I move on to personnel, Mr. Klein.
Absolutely.
There's two items under personnel. The first item is something that the committee had asked for related to a draft or a proposal related to increasing tuition reimbursement for our support and exempt staff. I shared this in an email with the board. I think it would have been last week, or it might have been early this week. I can't remember, but this is what we had called draft one of a proposal. And basically, if you've had a chance to review it, what you can see in the proposal is that first, what it does do is provide raising the tuition reimbursement for our support and exempt staff to match the dollar amount that's offered in the collective bargaining agreement, and continue to make that equivalent as if the collective and bargaining agreement tuition reimbursement would raise as well. And then it does offer all of the qualifiers that mirror what is also in the CBA. One thing that is somewhat different in this is that the reimbursement funds are applicable to testing and examination costs related to the certification process, which I got that from reviewing a number of other agreements a little bit like this, because, obviously, our support staff and some of them, they're looking to be certified teachers, and covering the test costs sometimes or reimbursing them could, that it's a definite benefit. Also in here, towards the end of the policy, or not the policy, it kind of outlines basically, you would have to give us a 2-year commitment, which is in the same as the collective bargaining agreement. If you would use the tuition reimbursement funds, and then if not, you would have to, pay them back to the district. And then there is some parameters at the end related to, what you would utilize. If you only would utilize, say, half, then it would be 1 year. And then anything less than that, it's always going to be at least a 1-year commitment to service. I don't know if anybody has any questions about this. What we tried to do is to make this as much like as what is in the collective bargaining agreement, for a number of reasons related to the process of approving classes, distributing funds. Like, to try to keep the same type of language and timelines of things.
Thank you for your efforts for that, Mr. Boyer. Any questions by the committee? Seeing none, is it okay if we move this forward for the committee of the whole? Mr. Amato, yes. Mrs. Lawrence, yes. Mrs. Spence?
Yes.
Mr. Klein and committee members, thank you so much for your support on this. As you know, we have been working on this for quite some time, and I thank Mr. Boyer for really spearheading the work to find something that does credit to our staff, but also protects the district. And I think we've really hit the mark here. The one thing we do need to do is just go through a little bit of a legal review process and make sure that we've got all the right parameters and we're not accidentally messing anything else up. So we are hoping that in 2 weeks you will see this for review and approval. But I just want to say here, if anything gets held up, we've already missed the window for the fall semester, so please don't despair. We'll work on it as quickly as possible, and it won't matter for online programs. But we just want to give ourselves enough room, since we have put in a long time, many months of work on this. So we want to make sure that we deliver appropriately and check all the boxes, so to speak.
It's totally understandable. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Boyer.
Yeah.
You want to continue?
Yep. Thanks, everyone. The next item under personnel is the kindergarten schedule related to the start of the school year, and Mr. Rodriguez is going to speak to that a little bit for the committee.
Yes, Thank you, committee members. Very briefly, some of you may know that for many years, for as long as I've been here, which is just shy of 20, and I think well before that, we had a specialized kindergarten schedule. And what that meant is that kindergarten teachers took the first 3 days of school to meet one-on-one with as many parents as they could fit in that time period. Since then, we have added pre-K counts, and we have many classrooms, not quite 12, on 9, I think, in district and more beyond that. But it's a bit incongruous to the rest of our process here, but we never really let that standard go because it was something that we had been doing for a number of years. So we have been reviewing that in comparison to other districts, in comparison to what we're able to get done. And we believe now that we are ready to move into a different process. So what that would mean is, like other school districts, we would be looking to do a kindergarten boot camp of some sort, and something that would help especially those students who have had no school, but it would be available to everyone to meet with parents and go over expectations and learn as much as we can. But we would be doing that before school with your permission and approval starting next school year. So that's our plan. We wanted to make sure that you are out loud about it. We've been talking to teachers for a number of years on this, so there's no surprise there. But we wanted to make sure that you understood what was happening.
So rather than the kindergarten students getting the first few days off, so to speak, they would start with everyone else, correct?
Yes.
I'm sure the parents will be very happy about that point. Mrs. Johnson?
Yes, very happy. Just on a personal note, all of the years that we did that we had a kindergartner start and they go in for their meeting on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or I guess it was one of those days, come home, not have school, go in on a Thursday for a full day, which for kindergartners was occasionally a little traumatic, at least for mine. It was a big adjustment. And then to have a 4-day weekend. Well, it used to be 4 days because it used to be right before the Labor Day weekend. It was like having 2 first days, or having the downsides of 2 first days in terms of its disruptiveness and the stress. And so I applaud this move. I think this is great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the committee members have any comments?
I agree. I think that makes sense.
Seeing no other comments, okay, if we move this forward with committee of the whole?
Yes, for me.
Wonderful. And I got 2 head nods, so we're good to go, Mr. Boyer.
Okay. We'll move on to informational items, and the first informational items related to the valedictorian, salutatorian. And I know that Mr. Rodriguez, Dr. Deannabelle, Ms. Leibel, and Ms. Pritt have joined us in order to review this with you.
Is that my cue, Mr. Boyer?
Yeah, just trying to stop my shares. I think there we go.
Yeah. All right. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Committee members, as always, we try to bring you the relevant and important items to consider. Our valedictorian process, valedictorian and salutatorian process have been a matter of policy for quite some time. So this is the right committee to address this issue. As some of you know, because I have spoken with you at one time or another, and of course I was a high school principal for a number of years, we've been looking at the valedictorian salutatorian process for a number of years, along with many other school districts who have looked at this and said, we're not so sure that the initial aims of this honor is now meeting its goal, or perhaps it's potentially interfering with our main mission. And what I mean by that is that the valedictorian and salutatorian, instead of being an honor that is bestowed because you simply work hard and happen to be number one, it becomes something that students chase. And because they chase it, it becomes less than a positive process. And in fact, in many ways, it can be a somewhat damaging process. Now, I don't want to disparage anything that has happened. I know full well that Mrs. Lawrence was the valedictorian of her class. Mr. Ian Lawrence was the one of the very first students who made me feel welcome when I was a high school principal, and he was a senior at the time. And he has been bringing joy to my life for the past 19 years. He was valedictorian. So there's no issue that a lot of good can come out of it. But there used to be this idea that, if you're a valedictorian, you automatically got a free ride somewhere, and that's just simply not true. And we have watched this process have some negative effects on students. So that's why I believe Mrs. Livel will be doing most of the talking along with Dr. D. So I invited them and asked them just to speak about their experience. And I'd especially like Dr. D'Annabelle to review with you what we think might be a better way to celebrate our top level students at the end of the year. He's reviewed this with me. He's talked to staff about it. They support it. And if everyone hears, first of all, just so you know, we know that this might be a long conversation, and we have absolutely no desire to do anything with the current class or the next class or even the class after that. So anything that we're talking about here is going to be well into the future, which takes the pressure off. As you know, I don't like high pressure. I'm not a high pressure sales guy. I don't like that routine. I think that we need to think about it, and we need to be all on the same page after we talk about it. So that's what tonight is. Tonight might be an intro. If everybody's all on the same page and says, hey, we shouldn't be admiring the problem, we should be doing something about it, then that's what we'll do. But if we're not ready for that, that is also totally okay, and where we expect we might be. So with that as a perhaps too long of an introduction, Kelly, Christian, why don't you talk to us a little bit about this issue?
Kelly, you can go ahead and share some of, you've been here a lot longer than me. Share some of your experiences with this, and then I can speak to some more recent things and what we would like to propose in place of valedictorian salutatorian.
Okay, I do want to just speak about 3 different situations that I have experienced since I've been here, been at the high school. My very first, I think, parent that was extremely upset because their child was not valedictorian. I knew they were upset when they found out, but they're at graduation, they didn't accurately hear what Mr. Rodriguez identified as the valedictorian's GPA. So mom called me the Monday after, very distraught, and wanted to know specifically what the valedictorian's GPA was. And I really couldn't give her that very individualized information. And she demanded, strenuously, that I provide the students' transcripts to her. And that was minor compared to the year after that. Student who came in second, the family was super upset. They were so upset that they came in and they had a meeting with the then principal. That student was beyond well-rounded, fantastic student, missed, and that's not probably the right word I should use, missed number 1 by 1/10 of a point. And the mother was sobbing. And that meeting really was a meeting where this student looked like he had failed, and he had such amazing accomplishments at our school that it was just terrible for everyone involved. And I still feel sad for them. Most recently, I think at the end of last year, there was some social media posts by some other students who were number 1 or possibly number 2, saying that they felt like the process was invalid or rigged in some way. These students are so high achieving, and I hate that when they leave our district feeling like they failed in some way. or we did not provide them with what they needed in some way. And there is pressure. We counted the emails that we were getting from students just at the end of last year, and there was over 50 emails from students that were underclassmen just in May, asking what their class rank is, and so many meetings that we have with, what can I add to my schedule? Not based on what I want to do with the rest of my life or what I'm interested in. It's just in order to get, hopefully get to number one.
Yeah, I'll share. I mean, that is my biggest concern with the rat race to number one and number two. Is our mission is to help students be successful at this level and at the next level, and that is I mean, really the biggest job of our school counselors is to help students identify what their future career path is and how we can help get them there here in the school. Just this fall, I had a student who is absolutely going to I don't want to give too much information because too much individualized detail information, but this student would absolutely in a few years be graduated with full scholarships in the area of their career path that they're most interested in. And chose this year to not have courses in that area specifically because, and I asked them this, I said, why are you choosing these AP courses over these other courses that are very seriously connected to the large amount of scholarships and the preparation you need for your future career? And the answer was, and I quote, I really want to be the valedictorian. And that's just one example of many times where students are making course selections, and not just students, but with their parents' consultation. Students and families are making course selections based on class rank as opposed to what would best prepare them for their future in college and career. We have had students again, like Kelly had mentioned, students come to us after graduation, kind of appealing their GPA so that they could retroactively be named number one or number two. We have, especially our junior class, the top juniors are constantly coming down to the guidance office, counseling office to ask about their grades, their rank, what courses they can take as juniors and seniors, what college courses they can take. Again, oftentimes, sometimes their college courses that they're choosing have nothing to do with their future career. They're doing it just to boost that GPA so that they can get to number one or number two. What we generally find is the kids who are ranked between 5 and 15 are our most well-rounded, happiest, most confident, most positive students in that senior class. And they are not feeling that stress of that rat race to get to number one or number two. We have a number of even ninth graders who by January are wanting to know their class rank and wanting to know what courses they can take to get to number one or number two, and they're already stressing about it as 14 and 15-year-old kids.
I actually, Dr. D, have had some come and ask me what their GPA is. Like, you don't have one, you don't have one yet.
Yeah, I mean the stressful side of it, the anxiety side of it, I know Kelly and Susan have a lot more experience with. My biggest heartache is when I have students who are choosing courses that I know are not in their best interest for their career path, and they are telling me it is because I want to be valedictorian, and that really just shouldn't be happening. And we can counsel them as best as we can, but ultimately when a student and a parent says, these are the courses I want to take, it's very difficult to say, no, we're not going to do that for you. I see Ms. Spence does have her hand up.
Yes, sorry. Thank you. So I just have a few questions, comments. Guess I'll start with my comments first. My comment is that I am beyond strongly against removing those two highest honors. I think they are very important for students. I do not see anything wrong with competition. Life is competitive, college is competitive, master school program is competitive, law school is competitive, doctor degree program is competitive. Um, High school should be competitive. I because a parent complained that their child did not win shouldn't be reason enough to remove the highest and second honor away from students who are well deserving, work hard. I can't see anything wrong with a student chasing to be the best, to get the highest honor, to get the best grades, to excel at their studies. I can't see anything wrong with a student choosing a different path in high school because no one, oh, well, some people know exactly what they're going to be. Um, Probably Mr. Amato knew he would be a teacher when he was in high school, but not everybody knows. Not everybody's that smart, right? You can be the highest honor, but I don't believe you may know where you're going, where you're headed. It's okay to explore different courses, classes. It's okay to be competitive. We talk about competition all the time on the sports side, but when the academic side, oh, let's cushion those for a loss. There are winners in life and there are losers. And our students need to know that from the very beginning. They should be chasing, the best grades when they're in kindergarten, if that's a thing. So emotionally, is that hard on the student to lose? Yeah, heck yeah. When you lose in life, it's hard. But there is a learning experience from that because sometimes a loss and not meeting that mark is character development, and it may be the best thing that happened to them. It may open up something in them that may not have been there before. It may help them deal with loss in the future. It may help them in college when that competition is really fierce and they didn't get something that they expected to have. So my question is, one, where's the data on this is damaging the students other than personal stories? And if there is data, is this nationwide data? Is all the schools in the area eliminating these highest honors? So those would be my
Sure.
two questions. Thank you so much for hearing me out. Appreciate it.
So I want to answer those questions and then I want to share what our proposal would be in place of valedictorian salutatorian. And then it's not my place to debate. It's your guys' place to discuss and bring things up. We're just here to share these experiences. From a data perspective, we have not like done a quantitative survey of students who are top 50 per se or top 10. We have not done that. We certainly could. We could use our character strong surveys, for example, to gauge their stress levels and things like that. If that's something the board would like us to do, we certainly could. We are simply sharing the experiences that we have here in the school of students coming down, weekly, stressing about their class rank. Spending time stressing over something that they can't, there's really nothing they can do about it on a weekly basis, but they're stressing about it on a weekly basis. And that's where we bring this to you as the people who are trying to, balance that experience out for our students. So the proposed replacement would be that our top 10 students in the graduating class, along with the class president, would be our 11 honored, top honored graduates at commencement. They would be the first row at graduation. we would publicly recognize them for their strong efforts throughout their 4 years of high school, and they would be the first people to get their diploma from Mr. Rodriguez. And those 10 plus the senior class president, those 11, they would be submitting for the opportunity to deliver remarks to their graduating class at commencement, with the kind of speaking prompt of that, rather than a thank you speech, a thank you like acceptance speech for an award, that their prompt would be much more reflecting on their 4 years with their peers and their activities that they were involved in, and providing some advice and recommendations for their peers going forward into their adult lives. So we at the high school think we would have a better experience at commencement as a result, and while still honoring a large group of students who are absolutely doing tremendous work, and getting much higher grades than I got when I was in high school. So that's where we would want to go if that's something the board would want to consider.
Thank you, Dr. D. Mrs. Lawrence, you've had your hand up for a little bit.
Well, I mean, I have a lot of different thoughts about this, and I don't want to take up all night talking about it, but just a couple of observations or comments from different angles, because yes, unfortunately, that was me and was my son. But I'm also a counselor, and I do understand the idea of mental health issues. But from what it's sounding to me, is this is more of an issue, like even what Mrs. Spence said, this is more of a who's putting the pressure on these kids? I will honestly tell you from my own point of view, even way back when I was in school in the 70s, there was always an issue with valedictorian salute. It happened all the time. Back then, the big problem was, or the big debate was, it was people who were taking business classes who were then getting higher scores than the college prep students, because at that point, nothing was weighted. And that happened a couple of times. And it was an argument, but nobody took it that seriously. It was something that I definitely did work for, and I don't want to use the word chase it, but it was a goal. But I wouldn't have fallen apart if I hadn't achieved it, because my family never pressured me. And that is the same with my children. My first son was, my second son missed it. He ended up third and missed it in the last week, and he took it fine. My daughter, on the other hand, finished in the top 20, and now she's the one that just gets her PhD. So clearly there is no, but was she disappointed that she wasn't higher? Yes, but I tried to encourage her to understand there's other ways to achieve. It's not that be all and end all. However, for some students, it is an accomplishment, and to just rip that away and say you can't do it. So my suggestion would be, because again, I don't think it should stress people out, and I think we have to do better. I do think one thing that will help with the course selection issue, and again, that's coming too from family pressure. I took as hard a courses as I could. I didn't try to take the easy way out, and I tried to make sure that, my kids didn't either. And they took what was relevant. And I think we just have to do a better job at expressing that. And I think two things that we could do with that. First of all, one of them is the fact that we are now weighting the college classes and AP the same. I think that's going to stop some of that. Well, I'm going to take it here and I'm going to take it here because it's worth different weights. I think that's helpful. I'm really, really glad we did do that. I'm not really, I don't really like the idea of saying, well, we'll just give award, we're going to name the top 10, because I think that's going to do the same problem. We're still having a competition. We're still saying instead of 2 now it's 10. And then what happens to kid number 11? So if we're going to do something like that, I would recommend more that we honor the students who do above a certain average. It's not a competition. So that means if 20 kids get whatever we set as that level, 20 kids get above it, they all get rewarded for that, because now they're not competing against each other. They're only competing against themselves. I would like to get that average, but it really doesn't matter what Joe over here does, because as long as I reach that bar, I'm going to be rewarded for it. And then I do think we still at some point should have the naming of a valedictorian salutatorian of then that group. I think one way we keep them from doing that is what was done in the past. I did not know my rank except at the end of the year. There was no ongoing ranks, ongoing GPAs. We didn't have that. We weren't told that. So I don't know why they're being told that. They don't need to know all of that. You know, if it's just a situation where you're not getting that information about where you are like that. And then at the end, we could still reward them. But I think if we set a bar, whatever, I don't know, whatever average would make sense, and say any student who's earned 100 or above is named an academic scholar, honorary scholar, whatever, sort of what we do with the honors diplomas, and say, and not put a number on it. Because I feel like if you say, oh, it's going to be 10 people, then you're going to still have competition with the number 11, you know, or 12. But I don't know we should take all the competition out of it, because it is meaningful to some students. I just think there should be ways we can not make it as pressure packed. And I don't know what that is, but I'd hate to see it just go away for the students who do want to achieve it. But they should understand it is not like some ticket to big success, because that's not true. So for whatever any of that's worth.
Thank you for your thoughts and comments, Mrs. Lawrence. Mr. Rodriguez?
I think Mrs. Johnson was ahead of me. Sorry, I just want to be a gentleman.
Mrs. Johnson?
I appreciate that. I'm not on the committee, so that's why I'm guessing I was at the end. I'll just go ahead though, since my mic is unmuted. I like competition. I will just say that, like, I am a competitive person, so I get the drive for competition, and that can be healthy and productive and get people to work hard. But I don't like how valedictorian and salutatorian end up treating all of high school like one giant competition, as if there is a winner of the class, because that ultimately is what it feels like to me. I like competitions like and awards for highest GPA in this category, or whatever, just an idea. Or in sports, I love sports competitions. So it's not, for me, like just anti-competitiveness, and we can't ever say who's the best at something. But when all of high school is summed up in here's person number one and here's person number two, and knowing that not just because of what we do in our schools, but how it is in the broader culture and how it is in families, that it ends up being kind of end up taking on this weight for kids. I just think it would be valuable to get rid of those two things where there's so much focus on it. I like Mrs. Lawrence's idea of honoring the kids above a certain grade point average, which I kind of think we do, right? That is what the honors and highest honors stuff is, I believe.
Diploma, but it's just listed in the
right
thing.
So maybe making a bigger thing of that. But I do like that personally better than a top 10, because even though top 10 might not be quite as cutthroat, it still might have that. It's still a competition. So to me, like, there's lots of competitions in life. But that's not ultimately what life is. You don't win at life. And so I feel like we shouldn't be treating it like you win at school. And I would like to see more focus on, I mean, we have the focus, but I would like to see us not have awards that don't mirror the mission. And that's what I feel like ends up happening with valedictorian. I feel like if our mission is to, prepare each student by name for success at every level, I don't see valedictorian and salutatorian really serving that in the way I'd like. I see how it's probably contradicting it. So those are my thoughts. I'd be happy to get rid of those awards and replace them with other things that honor students' achievements, but in a way that doesn't maybe create some of the more negative culture, and that doesn't take away from them preparing for the career path that they know they want to choose, or interests that they really want to explore, but maybe don't pay off in those ways.
Thank you for your thoughts, Mrs. Johnson. Mr. Rodriguez, you want to go now, or do you want me to, Mr. Rodriguez?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, I'm reminded when Mr. Boyer said, "Are you sure you want to talk about valedictorian?" So we knew full well that this was going to bring up some thoughts and some concerns, and my answer remains the same. We should be talking about this. It is policy, and it is something we actually have multiple high school principals in the virtual room right now. So yes, Mr. Klein, I'm calling you out a little bit, just a little bit, but I really believe in competition. I actually encourage teachers to use competition. So there's no question about that. But the reason that we did ask to speak with you about this issue and ask you to consider it, and perhaps it'll take more than 1 or 2 meetings, is because I believe that we have tipped over the healthy competition lever. I believe in healthy competition. I do not believe in Hunger Games. It was maybe an entertaining movie, but it's not what I want our high school to be about. So when we see, and we might not have quantitative data, but year after year, it's always the same. And that's why many other districts have moved away. So maybe one of the things that we can do is look at other districts, and we already know that many of them have moved away from this. But we might be able to quantify exactly how many have moved away. And Mrs. Lawrence, I really love your suggestion. Anybody above a level, so if it's 1, if it's 10, if it's 50, let's honor them if they've hit a higher level. I think that is a really, really great suggestion, one that we'll take back. So all in all, I just want to say thank you. We knew that this probably wasn't going to be solved in one night, but these are the real difficulties and concerns that we as educators deal with on a regular basis. And I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Spence.
Thank you. So my last comment is that everyone can't have a trophy. And that mindset that everyone gets a trophy, everyone is a winner, is setting up our kids for failure. They're not going to be prepared for life if you tell them that everyone is the same, because that is not how life is. You're going to have 50, 100 people on the stage to honor them. That's not how it works. There's always someone or two that come out on top, and they work hard for it. So to wipe that away and give their acknowledgement to 50 other kids, 10, 20, it doesn't matter. It should be theirs. Whether they chase it or not, it doesn't matter. That's their decision, their family's decision. Do I think the parents weigh in on this early when they're in elementary school? Absolutely. And that puts the pressure on them. So it seems to be that you need to educate the parents a little bit more about what this award is for and about how to go about earning it. But I do not think you eliminate it for the students that work hard. However they go about getting it, they rightfully win it. They own it. It's theirs. They became top of their class or second to their class. Students don't hit the mark all the time, so, but it doesn't make them a failure in life. It's just they didn't get this one award. Everybody can't get an award, and that everyone needs a trophy. That millennial thinking that they could be the boss in the first day of work is why some of our situations with young adults happen, because they have this mindset that everybody is a winner. When you lose a game, everybody gets it, even the winner of the game. So final thoughts. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you. Now, we're already 10 minutes over, so I ask that you guys wrap up. Mr. Armato, then Mrs. Lawrence.
Yeah, so I hesitated putting my hand up because there's so much philosophical stuff here that it's hard to comprehend. Ms. Spence's point is well taken. In the real world, there are winners and there are losers. Somebody gets to be the boss and somebody gets to be under the boss. That being said, and my background in athletics is geared towards somebody's got to win. And I will tell you, in wrestling, we promote a great deal the joy of, at the end of the match, having the referee hold your hand up in the air in front of everybody and signify that you are the winner. That has a great deal of joy attached to it. So that being said, the problem, as I see it philosophically, is not so much the goal, although I'm not, like I said, I'm not a big fan of valedictorian and salutatorian, because I've seen it diluted so many times of people, just as Ms. Leipold and Dr. DeAnnabelle alluded to, people playing the game to get to the goal, or what they perceive as the goal. And that's true in athletics also, of people playing the game to get to what they perceive as the goal. The problem, I think, is that we don't celebrate effort and accomplishment and growth. And that's one of the things that I like in our district, of Mr. Rodriguez going around to classrooms and celebrating students' growth. Not that they became number one or number two, but you improved. That, to me, that's the real issue. Learn societally, getting to recognize the importance of, did I get any better? Okay? I could be a cross-country runner and run the course in an hour. Okay, well, I probably came in last. If the next time I run it, I come in last, but I ran it in 59 minutes, I should be celebrating that I did better. That, at the end of the day. I don't know how much value that has, and I didn't want to take up more time, but that's where I am with it.
Thank you. Mrs. Lawrence?
Yeah, just one thing, just as a comment, just something to think about as we go into the next time we discuss it. But it's just concerning to me when I hear the stories, you know, that Dr. D and Ms. Leibold are saying with some of these students having it at that importance. And I guess what I would like to know is when and why did it become like that? Because honestly, it wasn't like that. I'm not saying there were never students that did that. There were students that were that competitive way back, but I don't remember having the horror stories that they're telling me. Not to that level. I mean, again, there's always going to be some people, but I would like to know where that whole intense pressure, where that's coming from, because I don't think it was there all the time. Like I said, there's always some stuff. There's always complaints. I've heard them, you know, but I don't, I mean, I can speak from firsthand in my time. We ended up in my class, the top 10 were all college prep students. We all were in competition, and yet we all liked each other, and we never competed, and nobody had a breakdown. So where is that coming from? That's what I think would be interesting to figure out, because that's what's really unhealthy, and I don't think it has to be that. So, or whatever.
Thank you, Mrs. Lawrence. I'm going to steal a phrase from Mr. Hilton in his committee and use my executive power, so to speak, to have a comment at the end. As a high school principal for 20 years, this is something that I started in Lower Merion, this discussion, about 15 years ago. Boyertown, I was a principal first in Boyertown. Moving from Boyertown to Lower Merion, the amount of pressure placed on the kids by their parents and their family was incredible. We had this all the time in Lower Merion, and that's why we tried to do away with the valedictorian and come up with something else. I believe they've done that since I've retired. So that might be one school you want to check, Dr. D. But I saw breakdowns. I saw families saying horrible things in front of their students. Things like, you're number two, you're a loser. Number two in a class is by no way, shape, or form a loser. That's something to be celebrated. And it's just what it did to a lot of students was horrifying to me. So if you need any anecdotes for this. I can probably provide a couple. It was heart-wrenching often at the end of the year. And Mrs. Lawrence, maybe your comment about not letting them know the GPA ahead of time, that might have some validity. Students they just take weighted classes because they wanted everything to be weighted. And I remember one year, one of the students they needed a break from the weighted classes. They took ceramics. They lost valedictorian because of that, but they found something that they're still doing in life as an alternate to get rid of stress. And to me, that's, excuse me, so much more important than taking another weighted course. Mr. Boyer, I believe you have 2 comments before we are finished with this meeting. As Mr. Rodriguez said in the beginning, this is not something we're solving tonight. We've had some great comments by many, many people. It's something we need to think about, talk to others about, and start to figure out when this discussion, where this proceeds. It's something that probably we won't be making a decision on until the current class is out of high school, meaning if the 9th grade class is in school, we're probably going to grandfather this over until the time which they would graduate. Is that fair, Mr. Rodriguez?
Well, it depends upon the speed with which, well, first of all, if you decide to do something different, which we understand you may not, if you do decide to do something different, we would suggest, like right now, there is no GPA for freshmen. So we would suggest that be the first year that any change would be affected on. We don't believe that it would be fair for current seniors, juniors, or sophomores, which is to say, fair is a loaded word, but hopefully committee members understand what I'm trying to communicate.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer, you want to conclude for us?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Klein. I'll be quick, everyone. 2 informational items really relate. One is with ELL. We're currently looking at our numbers of students as they relate to staff. I will probably be talking more about this in October. October is our highest enrollment registration peak month with numbers, but we are looking at numbers and they are increasing across the board, which would look at maybe adding a staff member, but I don't have that complete answer right now. And the last informational item is sort of the same thing with our middle school special ed caseload numbers as they relate to staff. We're probably going to have some kind of data for you at our next meeting, if possible. All right, that's all I have, Mr. Klein. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Are there any public comments at this time?
Not at this time, Mr. Klein.
Thank you very much. That will conclude our policy and personnel meeting. We'll see you the first Thursday of October. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion. We had a valuable discussion tonight. Thank you, Dr. D and Ms. Leibold, for your comments and for being in attendance with us. Mrs. Lawrence, it's all up to you.
Thank you. And since it's partly my fault that we went over, I'll accept that blame. That's fine. All right. So I guess any public comment in the last 30 seconds?
Not at this time, Mrs. Lawrence.
Not at this time. All right. So we have several, I guess, different topics here that I don't know, Mr. Oxenford, do you want to take it away?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Ms. Lawrence, and good evening, everyone. We do have a handful of informational items on the agenda for tonight. We are going to provide you some updates as promised at the August meeting, which was we had some of the TSI presentations, which had consumed the majority of the meeting. And I had promised to give you an update over a couple of these topics. But before I get into that, we do have Ms. McCoy in attendance tonight, our pre-K accounts coordinator, to provide us with some highlights from the 2023-2024 school year. So please welcome Ms. McCoy.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, once a year I share my screen, so hold on. Entire screen. Can you see that? Great. Okay, so this is not nearly as deep as salutatorian and valedictorian, as we have none of that in pre-K. I'd like to thank you, but I do have a little experience along with Sue, which I just like to throw out there because I'm proud of my kids. So, so thank you everyone for having me. I'm always excited to talk about what's going on in the district and in pre-K counts. Here's pictures of our kids yesterday. So they have adapted well to pre-K. The first week does not look like this, but it gets better every day. Well, I don't think I know how to work this. Oh, look at that. There it was. So, district mission, which we all know, is to prepare each student by name for success at every level. And I truly believe, and I believe that the whole pre-K staff knows that a good foundation for kindergarten is a good foundation for every grade that follows. One bad experience in school is something that every one of us remembers a bad experience in school. So I really think that if we start them out on the right foot, academically and socially, that we're preparing them for every grade that follows. As a former high school teacher, I am constantly amazed at what the pre-K teachers do every day. There can be no harder working people in education. There could be people that work as hard, but 3 and 4 year olds have an attention span of 7 to 12 minutes. So that means they are always on the move doing something else, doing something new. If they're not changing diapers and teaching letter sounds, if they're not building a scavenger hunt around the building to hunt for numbers, they're making sure everybody's in line. I mean, it is just nonstop, and I think it's amazing to watch, and it makes me really happy to have this experience. 23-24 was a rebid year for pre-K counts. Rebids occur every 3 years, and Aaron Schwank, who's our federal programs coordinator, did a great job of writing our grant to the tune of $2,620,000. So that was awesome for the district, and it gave us 262 pre-K slots. So we serve throughout the district and our community sites 262 students. We did have a lot of fun things happen this year as well. For the first time this year, we implemented here's some of our kids. We implemented a benchmarking tool to measure student achievement and growth. We created it based on the kindergarten readiness skills and standards as identified by the state, by PDE. Measures things like colors, shapes, number recognition, lowercase, uppercase, counting to 20, writing their names, positional words like big, bigger, biggest, in front of, next to, behind. And our scores showed that our students are growing and achieving in pre-K. We saw 92% growth in literacy of 30% or more, and 82% growth in math. And at first I'm looking at like, why is math so low? Well, it turns out the kids were coming in with higher math skills than literacy skills. So when you come in at 95%, it's harder to grow by 30% when you just need to get to 100. We saw 80% achievement in literacy and 94% achievement in math. What I really like about these tests, these kind of benchmark testing, is it tells us as teachers what it is we need to work on, because it tells us how to which children need us to differentiate, but it also tells us as a group, if the whole group isn't growing in a certain area, then we need to revisit how we're instructing. And that's one of the things I really like about data, because teachers need to be able to look at what they're doing as a whole. Maybe it's not as effective as it could be. So that's one of the things that we're going to be working on at our next in-service, which is next week. We got a new playground last year. This is it. It is amazing. I can't thank you enough for this playground. It has all kinds of different things on it. We used to have one piece of equipment, and it was a sliding board, and it had like a little tunnel, and that was all. So now we have the most amazing playground around. And our other playground moved to the high school, where we have a class as well, which I'll get into in a moment. Another picture of the playground. And then I included these pictures because these are instruments. And when I first saw these, I was like, oh my God, the neighbors are going to hate us, all this clanging and banging. But it turns out they make the greatest, most I didn't realize they made giant instruments that had such a nice melody to them. They're outside my window, and I actually really, really like them. So that was good for the neighbors and me. This is our high school classroom. Last year, we opened up a classroom at Pottstown High School. It has a separate entrance from where the high school students come in, and the old playground equipment from here is now over there, which is now our playground can hold a number of classes at once. Over there, we have just the one classroom, and they use that out in the courtyard. Dr. D'Annabelle was gracious enough to let us put it out in the courtyard, which we appreciate, and it's fenced in. So our kids get their gross motor skill and outdoor time there. The high school class, the reason we opened it was we had room for 20 more students, and we could take on 20 more students. And many years ago, when I was the career and tech director, I brought a pre-K classroom over that was at the administration building at the time. And I did that partly because our early childhood education students at the high school need clinical hours. So they need to go out and work with actual children in a clinical setting, and or in a a daycare or a pre-K count setting, and they were having to walk, and walking cut into their hours. So they were spending all that time walking back and forth from the high school to wherever they were going, say the North End. They would have to go from North End to back to the high school, and from the high school back to North End. So that ate into their time. So this way, they're right down the hall from where Miss Rhodes' classroom is, so they can do all their clinical hours at the high school. So it works. It gave us 20 additional spots to service students and families, and it gave them, the high school students, the opportunity to get their clinical hours. And they have already started their clinical hours with them. I don't know why I didn't include a picture of that. I forgot. I had some pictures of they were drawing while they were doing an activity. But this is the teacher. Her name is Carly Bouchard. This is her students last year, and this was their activity of catching a leprechaun in March. We took our first field trip. I called it the senior trip because only the 4-year-olds went, and they were the ones headed to kindergarten. 3-year-olds need to use a car seat and a bus. 4-year-olds don't. So that's how we determined that it would just be the 4-year-olds. The district students all went to Marymead Farms, and this is the North End students. They went to, it's called the Barnyard in Collegeville. Excuse me. It went really well. Everybody was really nervous because we'd never done it before. I like this picture because they're so little you can't even see some of them. So I'm still mesmerized by how cute they are. You should come see a fire drill. It's the cutest thing you'll ever see. But this is our field trip. The other thing we did this year that was new, we had the visiting farm come. This was through Quiver Farms, and it went to all the elementary buildings for the pre-K students. It was there for 3 hours, so some of the other classes got to see it, and a couple of the principals are going to piggyback on our visit this year so that their whole school can see it. Seems like kind of a little thing until the first kid that came out of the building said pointed to a turkey and asked what kind of dog it was, and then you realize like pictures aren't enough. They actually seeing the farm animals was really really beneficial for them. So that was another fun activity that we did. And then my two favorite activities, and the last two things I'll talk about, was we held a kindergarten readiness boot camp this year. So it happened the 2 years before school started. We started small. We started with just 20 students. We looked at all of their data. We looked at their attendance, their attendance, and their benchmark scores, their attendance, and then teacher referrals for students who might need a refresher before they get to kindergarten, because maybe they hadn't mastered every skill, or they were close but they weren't quite there. So we invited those kids back for 2 weeks, and I didn't take a picture of it, but we had a great picture of them writing their names the first day and them writing their names just the last day of 2 weeks. And it's a whole different, it was many of them, like they had the letters, but they weren't in order, and they weren't in a straight line. And by the end of the week, they looked like they should. So it really was beneficial in terms of refreshing them and getting them ready for kindergarten after the summer off. This was one of their science activities. They had to guess which things would float and which things would sink. And then they made tin foil boats, and they put plastic coins in them to see which ones would float and which ones wouldn't. Some of the things they went over were all the things I mentioned in the that we tested on in the benchmark testing. And then the last thing was Multicultural Day. We start this year. I really wanted to start working towards recognizing the different cultures in the building and celebrating the different heritages. We did that with speakers. We did it with building decorations, and then we had a big week where every student had a passport. It got stamped when they went to each different country. Each classroom was a different country. We have 4 classrooms. So this was China, where they celebrated the Chinese New Year and they made floating dragons. So that was a science activity. They had to the dragons had to float a certain way. This was Africa. They made African masks, masks of animals, and that was art with fine motor. They did native. They made maracas with plastic eggs and comedy pressers, and then they did Native American dancing, which they watched on screen, and then they did that to the Native American or the Native Mexican music, and then they did a little brief 2-minute lesson on Italian art and how they painted on the ceilings, and then they got to color under the tables where they were Michelangelo. And then the last part of that day, that we had families bring in dishes from their native country. So each class had a different family. So we had Liberian, Haitian, and Puerto Rican food. And then our family engagement coordinators, who are both fluent in Spanish, came in and read stories in English and Spanish. So it's been a great year. I love it here. If anybody would like to visit, I'd love to show you what we're doing. I'm very proud of the teachers here, and you're welcome to visit anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCoy. I love the pre-K counts, preschool programs we've had. They've always been one of my favorite programs our school does. So that's really cool to see.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to see if anyone else had any comments or questions, but I don't see hands, so I guess not. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Oh, Ms. Spence has a hand now. I see it.
Sorry, it takes a little bit to get there.
All right.
I just saw the great presentation. That was so adorable. The cuteness is just overwhelming. But I think it was a great idea to bring the babies over to the high school for my other babies. Anyone under 18, I call them a baby. Is that program for the student teacher, for them to be a part of the student teacher program, or is that something else? I think you speak fast, so I didn't catch that one.
I know I have a time limit. I'm sorry. I always have too much to say. The early childhood education program is part of the career and tech program at the high school. And those are students who want to go into either early education or, anything from newborn up to probably 4th grade, whatever that grade certification level is. But those are those students. So they have NOCTI testing where they get tested on certain skills like lesson planning, and then basic things like hand washing as well. They do all of that in there. And then one of the things they need to do is they need to do clinical hours. So they can do them. They could do them in a kindergarten or 1st grade classroom, or they can do them in a pre-K classroom, or they could do them. I don't know if they can do them at a daycare because they don't have curriculum there. I would have to check with Mrs. Rhodes about that, but they have to do those clinical hours. So I don't know exactly what the student teacher program is, but this is the career and tech program, which focuses on that career and tech program.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, there you go, Mr. Oxenford.
All right, so we do have a couple other items on the agenda, which are primarily informational items. I'm going to provide information now, and then over the course of the year, and we'll try to always have at least one other guest presenter talk about one of their topics to keep everybody up to speed. Just know that the number of asks coming out of this particular department right now are going to be somewhat minimal this year, and we recognize that over the course of the year, there are some seasons that in the late spring, that is typically when we do our adoption proposals. And in the lead up to that, we usually give you insight as to where we're headed with those. But we are just coming off of a brand new K-8 math adoption. And we are in our 2nd year of the adoption with Reading Wonders, round number 2. So primarily, those topics are covered for a good little stretch of time, and we've done a very nice job of getting some necessary resources in place. And what we're focusing on now is getting very good at using those in the meantime. So I do want to talk about some of the summer curriculum projects that went on. I'm going to give you some overview and dig into a couple of them at a little bit of a drive-by level, but we had 59 staff members participate in working on some summer curriculum projects, which was a lot. We had things ranging from the math module, assessment building, text-dependent analysis, study sync, summer or social studies, curriculum writing. Dr. D'Annibal led some writing with the high school ELA department. The library department worked on some things. The music department wrote some things, and the school counselors revamped some of the things that they had in place. So you hear a little bit about the TDA and text-dependent analysis, which I want you just to really think about improvement with writing. This summer, we had 12 teachers, primarily upper elementary and middle school teachers, participate in this, with 2 coaches facilitating the sessions. And over the course of the summer, we were able to establish a benchmarking system in grades 5 through 8, which is a pretty big accomplishment. At the minimum, TDA is worth 25% of the standardized weighted factor on the PSSAs. So it's important that we are paying very careful attention to that, and to have some benchmarking system in place. We're able to monitor the progress over the course of the year. We also have goals set up just within text-dependent analysis for grades 3 to 8, which help us stay on track. And, there was a lot of focus on close reading, collaborative discussions, and making sure teachers knew what it meant to craft good TDA questions. Study Sync was our middle school ELA curriculum that was adopted in the spring. We had a total of 6 teachers and an MTSS coach. We worked on this over the course of the summer, got really familiar with the new assessments, the new scope and sequence that goes along with the series, along with making sure they understood the different elements within the text that specifically address the standards that are required to be taught in Pennsylvania over the course of the year in those particular grade levels. The upside is that the way that whole curriculum resource is structured is that it's broken into units, and almost all of the content is addressed in the first 4 units. So even though it has 6 units, most of the things that are assessed by the end of the school year are taught by the end of the 4th unit. So we're very proud that teachers had requested it. It is the tool that piggybacks onto the elementary curriculum resource, goes hand in hand. And we've gotten very good feedback so far as we've checked in on people who are using it. The comments that we have as we do check on people are like, yeah, I think I have a couple questions for the person who facilitated the professional development in August. I have some follow-up questions. So we're in the process of setting up some office hours and some opportunities for all those questions to now get answered. I think you've heard about the new generation science standards, NGSS. So those were written at the national level, but what Pennsylvania likes to do is to put its own spin on things. So Pennsylvania does not function under NGSS. What Pennsylvania have are steals. And so knowing that science often takes the back seat to math and reading, we've been trying to lay the foundation for some really good understanding as to what the adjustments are with steals. And at our in-service in June, our administrators participated in a professional development session that was hosted by Dr. Stephanie Schwab from the MCIU, who specializes in this particular area. And all of our administrators who were at that administrative in-service participated in the session, started to get a glimpse into what steals actually means and understanding the concepts, because they have to get their head around it. They need to be able to support that in their building. And what we have as a follow-up is, over the course of the school year, about 4 more times, we're going to have Stephanie come back and provide further professional development to all of our building level administrators so that they continue to stay up to speed with steals. Another upside is that our secondary teachers, everyone at the middle school and high school, are invited to participate in after-school professional development opportunities a total of 3 times throughout the school year. Even though they had things on August 12th in the afternoon with Stephanie Schwab, they have ongoing opportunities throughout the course of the year. And that's anyone at the middle school or high school who teaches science. And then elementary teachers, we have an elementary curriculum council, which is one person per grade level per building. So in each one of those elementary buildings, we've got 3 teachers within each grade level. One of those people represents their grade level at their building, and they participate in the elementary curriculum council. So it's pretty much 1/3 of all of our elementary teachers, K through 4, will have a series of elementary curriculum council meetings 4 times throughout the course of the year. And those 4 are going to get professional development from Stephanie Schwab and continued understanding of steels. We also, over the course of the fall, have an opportunity that the MCIU is hosting a gentleman named Brett Molding, who was one of the primary content writers of the national, the new generation science standards, the national level standards. So they're going to have him come in, and we have a total of 10 teachers who are going to participate in going to the IU for a 2-day stint. And this is K through 12. And they're going to get some time with Brett Molding and be able to learn more about how to appropriately implement the new science standards into their classroom. And then to sort of cap off the summer curriculum projects, we spent a lot of time trying to work on improving our math curriculum alignment. We've had people pounding the pavement for a pretty long time asking for this to get sharpened up. And I think we've had a couple attempts over our recent history to try to get that done. But I'm proud to say that in the summer of 2023, not this summer before, we were able to finally find a good resource that PDE puts out, which allows us to better understand the modules and how the math content is supposed to be delivered K through 12. And within that, there's what's called a math module map, which we spent last summer with people from every grade level and every subject, once you get to the high school, it's algebra, geometry, and algebra. We spent time with people who teach every one of those courses, total of 16, writing our curriculum to align through this framework so that there is better alignment, so that within your grade level, you may think you're covering the content the right way, but by chunking it in this way and having it fit into the big picture of the K-12 scope, you can understand how it fits a little bit more precisely. And the way that the modules are set up are brilliant. And one of the people who spearheaded some of these efforts was Mr. Bob Decker, who, you all know is a very well-known math teacher at the high school. And he was very meticulous in working on this and being willing to get into the weeds with everyone and dissect the different topics and how things were aligned within different math module units. And this past summer, we were able to, with our new math resource, write all of the assessments. All of the kindergarten through 8 assessments are written in alignment with the math modules that were written last year, which is what PDE put out. And we took those assessments and actually have those available inside of Linkit so that we can be able to administer those. So we have legitimately common assessments K to 8 and a very good tool for going ahead and looking at the results of those assessments, because I think often we may give the assessment, but being able to do something with the data from that is a whole different story. New teacher orientation. I alluded to this last meeting that on August 6th, 7th, and 8th, we had our new teachers, total of 37 new teachers, which is a lot. And that means Mr. Boyer was pretty busy this summer. And, that captures some of the people who were hired since last August, because part of the induction requirement is that they participate in orientation. Over the span of those 3 days, we actually had 14 different people come in and present on various topics, everything from getting started with, Mr. Rodriguez to Mr. Boyer reviewing some of the induction overview requirements and some of the other required trainings he has to provide. We got all of the laptops distributed. We did Power School training. Joe Rusevich spent some time with them talking about the Foundation for Pottstown Education. The Devereaux Center for Effective Schools came in and provided a workshop that was just under 4 hours long on building successful classrooms. I think I told you before, we had a retirement planning consultant come in, talk to them about jumping on the retirement planning process early in their career. Matt Moyer did a presentation, and Dr. Dana Girth, who was our MTSS coordinator, did they did a phenomenal job in presenting on their particular topics. The Federation leadership, Ms. Yoder and Ms. Miller, came out and met with the new staff members, and then all of our new teachers met their mentors and spent some time with them, and then went back to the building for the remaining part of the third day so that they could get up, get acclimated to the building, and get rolling. Any questions about new teacher orientation? Should I pause? August in service. We had 4 days this year, and it was a pretty arduous 4 days. Started on August 12th, and we had a variety of sessions. We try to customize all of our professional development based on everyone's instructional responsibilities, and something that we had in place for a little while. It's been, Stephen's been pretty adamant about the way this works. He wants our staff in the building with the people who are part of their building first minute on the first day. We're not doing the thing where we gather everyone as a district and have this big kickoff meeting to start it off. And there's nothing wrong with that, but to start it off, we believe that you should be in your building with the people so that new people can be introduced, and you can make sure that you hear from your building principal, who's going to be running point on the majority of your things over the course of the year. Second half of the day, they went in and spent time with other people who share their exact responsibilities, such as all third grade teachers were together and all the science teachers at the middle school were together. August 13th was primarily dedicated towards the reunification training at the building level. And then in the afternoon, the emergency response teams participated in reunification training. We also did the family engagement phone calls. I think this was, I believe, year number 3 that we went into this full-fledged. I sent out a survey. I have about 152 responses. I should have way more than that, but just out of the 152 responses that I got, this is as of 4:52 today, there were a total of 3,277 phone calls made home to families before the start of school. So knowing that that doesn't represent probably half of our staff and their response, that's a pretty good amount of phone calls going out before school got started. So I'm proud that we were able to squeeze that into the commitment, and for our teachers to go ahead and good teachers, they do that anyway, but the fact that we're trying to provide them time and then actually report on it, I think speaks to the manner at which and level at which we're trying to reach out and connect with families prior to the start of the school year. Last 2 days of in service were dedicated to professional development, where they got anyone who had a new curriculum resource got some professional development on that. New staff members, we participated in CPI training for them full days, and for everyone else, the refresher courses, technology training videos. We also did vector trainings, which were required, and Edmentum, we did refreshers on Edmentum Exact Path, Study Island. Our middle school and high school staff and our special ed department hosted a series of trainings based on their instructional priorities. Next full day in service is actually next Friday, and the majority of the day is dedicated towards data review and instructional planning. And as with standing practice, we start the year with screeners, benchmark assessments, and diagnostics. These are used a variety of ways across the system, K to 12, but we intentionally do these baseline assessments across the board with the intention of having this day so that we can approach the year in a data-driven, focused manner, so that we can get some pretty significant results and know at the end of the year, based on our baseline, did we get the response that we were expecting? Building principals are also orchestrating some additional professional development. They do have some requirements and things they called out inside of their submission with CSI, ATSI, and the TSI plan. So they're going to be working on those. Questions about the August in service or the upcoming professional development? All right. So I think you've heard a little bit about, we've been talking about Monco 360. I think there's been some pretty good social media going around. I just want to report on this, show a couple pictures. So we're up and running. I mean, without getting too far into it, Mr. Bachman is just such a great fit for it. Monco staff members have been over there and visiting and supporting and have been great partners with the whole idea. And they are just extremely pleased by what they are seeing and what he has to offer. They talk about how when they pull into the parking lot, he's already there and he's already moving on some things, and has been very impressive with the intricate level at which he's approached his responsibility with this, with developing the program. We've had a good support network, the board, business office, superintendent, and we've had many things that are in place, and he's been doing a fine job of developing the conditions over there. He's got to make sure to create the conditions where students can be safe to be challenged, to develop their problem solving skills. And really, we're also focusing on their ability to be a good teammate and work well with others and demonstrate flexibility, dependability, and probably most important, which I feel like I heard a little bit earlier tonight, a little bit of resilience, right? Like the idea that you're expected to be challenged, and that's actually where the growth happens, is when you find that level at which you're starting to fail. And it's been pretty interesting to watch the dynamics evolve just in this narrow window of time. And with that, I want to be able to show a couple pictures and just walk you through some of the things that we're seeing. So can I just get somebody, Mr. Kleiner, Ms. Lawrence, can you give me a thumbs up just to verify you can see the pictures? So took a handful of pictures. This is not an Anthony Santiago fancy production. This is Ryan Oxenford dropping by on a random Wednesday, taking some pictures just to capture some of the things that are up and running. We're at West Campus. This is South Hall. This is the back entrance. So it's a nice, safe entrance. This is morning arrival. You can see it's nice and coned off. No traffic, empty parking lot. Beautiful, right? Beautiful for middle school kids coming in. After they get out, they actually exit. This is very strategically placed. They've got a painted section so that they are gathering together and heading into the building from there. And they go together as a group, walk together to the classroom as a group after they take a nice little ride up the elevator through that bottom parking garage. And this is the classroom. Classroom is split into thirds. So the spot that I'm standing in, and I'll show you in the next picture, is the storage area. The middle section that's just in front, where the taller tables are, the three different taller tables with the electrical cords hanging down. Those are the workstations, and this is where they actually do some of their physical work. And then in the front section is the instructional area. And obviously the smart board up here, but there are whiteboards all over the place that they use for not only the lessons, but a lot of drawing that happens inside of the class. So they spend a little bit of time in the instructional part up front, followed by their time here where they're actually doing some hands-on activities. And this is the storage area, very nicely put together, very nicely organized, very well supported. And then when they come in, they get themselves set up, they drop off their phone, grab the calculator, and get rolling on the day. And you can see, the front section, we've got students who are part of this. Mr. Bachman, I'll just say that I sat in his classroom and listened to him describe some of those things. I did double check some of the philosophical principles that he had written on the table on the whiteboards. It was quite impressive to know that he was already working with students in that way. And again, just a couple more pictures of students engaging. Then they transition. So Mr. Bachman, who is, like I said, probably twice already, extremely methodic in the way that he's approaching this, knowing that teamwork was going to be part of the concept he wanted to lay the foundation for, intentionally picked some pretty weak materials for the students to complete the task, which is newspaper. And that required students to work together as they're transitioning their item. This isn't a great picture, but on the back here, you see they're actually starting to move some of their projects together, and it is next to impossible for them to do it by themselves. And at the workstation, students working on some of their project. And I obviously in the picture cannot capture some of the things that they were talking about, but it is already impressive. And then the president of Montgomery County Community College stopped by and spent some time in the room and was absolutely pleased at what she saw. And as much as we are in our early stages of getting everything up and running, was highly impressed with how well developed the idea is and how everything had just fallen into place just nicely. And with that, That is all of my information, Mrs. Lawrence.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That's really cool. You know how excited I am about anything we're doing, connecting that. I know I should know this, but how many students do we actually now have in this program?
18.
So is it 99 basically?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. All right. No, I think it's awesome. Anyone else? Any comments, questions? So even though we started late, we're going to be done on time. Or yeah, whatever. All right. Do we have any public comment?
Not at this time, Mrs. Lawrence.
Not at this time, but time's up. So anyone else have any comment? All right, then I guess we will adjourn and we'll be back in a month. Thank you.